The first thing you're going to want to do is clean the hatchet. Now I'm going to push the hatchet into clay. Clay is used so that we can create an even parting line and so that we can create keys in the mold, which will give us a nice seal when we put the two halves together. Apply a very thin layer of mold release and wipe away any excess. Mold release is used so that the ComposiMold can be separated from the hatchet much easier. Melt the ComposiMold and brush it onto the hatchet while it is still thin. As ComposiMold cools, it will start to thicken. Apply thicker layers as it cools until the mold is at least a 1/4 inch thick. And don't forget, remelt and reuse the ComposiMold that has spilt over the sides. Once the ComposiMold has cooled, it is time to create the mother mold. Create a mixture of Plaster of Paris, then soak the cheesecloth in the plaster and spread it over the mold. You can also use cement or resins and fabric other than cheesecloth to accomplish the same thing. It will take about 3 hours for the plaster to harden. At that point, it's time to demold. Remove the ComposiMold from the plaster mother mold, then remove the hatchet from the ComposiMold. Using a mixture of Plaster of Paris, fill in any holes or imperfections in the mother mold. You can skip this step, but I just found it helpful when making the keyholes. The keys help align the mold. This prevents the two halves from sliding, which helps produce a nice symmetric part. Now, to prevent the second half from bonding to the first, apply a very thin layer of mold release on the mold and on the hatchet. Make sure to wipe away any excess mold release. Brush on a layer of ComposiMold while it is still thin to pick up the detail. You may want to cool the mold in the fridge or freezer before creating the second half of the mold. This will prevent the two halves from melting into each other. You should also wait until the ComposiMold has cooled below 140 degrees Fahrenheit before brushing it on. Remember, ComposiMold is a thermoplastic that's affected by heat. To prevent the plaster mother mold halves from bonding to each other, place a piece of saran wrap on the first half of the mold to create a barrier. Now do the same thing that we did earlier by soaking cheesecloth in Plaster of Paris to create your second half of the mother mold. Make your rubber hatchet look real by brushing pigment or oil-based paint onto the mold and adding it to your silicone. Then brush the colored silicone onto the mold. Once I finished brushing the silicone, I quickly put the two halves together, clamped them shut, and added more silicone to fill the rest of the mold. After 16 hours, the silicone was cured, and I was able to demold the awesome looking hatchet. Now go ahead and make your own silicone props.